actually, the order of the presentations actually works out quite well. And Chirag really kind of set up the big picture talking about digital curation. And I'm kind of taking a little bit more focused look at it, looking at a specific set of materials, in this case, curating archaeology materials, digital archaeology materials, I should back up and say. And where Chirag was at the beginning, I'm really at a continuation. This is something that I started looking at the beginning of the semester, and had an opportunity to start exploring this in the digital preservation seminar. And I've had then a chance now to add to that and continue to expand this. And hopefully, the outcomes of some of this will play a role in my future research. Okay, so today I just want to talk a little bit about what I've learned so far. I want to talk about just some of the challenges, why we need to be concerned about preserving digital materials, which I'm sure that will sound familiar to many of you, but I think it's worth it just to kind of go back and to look at it again to kind of set the context for my discussion. I also will talk about a framework. I think one of the valuable things I learned in this class this semester is looking at the literature and coming up with frameworks and other ways to look at new issues and problems and repurposing those. And then finally, I will take a look at specifically at the archaeology process and some of my next steps in this continuing research effort. So we want to think about setting the stage, some of the background, why it's important to look at preserving digital materials and be concerned about this issue. As we continue to apply new technology to research practices, and this just isn't in the sciences. I think a lot of cases, a lot of these studies that are referenced here are focusing exclusively or pretty much primarily on the sciences. I think these are problems that also impact the humanities and the social sciences as well. But as we continue to apply the new types of information technologies, specifically the information and communication technologies, it's leading us to more opportunities to collaborate with scholars within our departments, with the other departments on an institution, campus, and also in other disciplines. It's also giving us more opportunities to not only capture and use additional data, but also to then reuse it in the future and to repurpose it for other types of studies. Say something that maybe a geographer is capturing, a biologist in the future may use that data to help them come up with some of their own particular research questions and answer those. But at the same time that information communication technologies are helping us to capture these new data and to use it in different and new ways, it's also resulting in basically an overwhelming amount of data to have to keep tracking on projects and to not only to store and manage during the project life cycle, but in some cases far into the future to meet specific requirements set by funders. And as we continue to get this information in digital format, a lot of the materials are disappearing, whether it's from technology obsolescence, different hardware platforms, software, or just degradation of storage media, or just poor data or information management stewardship during projects. Now, a lot of this, again, I started off by saying this applies to science. A lot of research has been on science, because I think, especially in the U.S., a lot of the money goes to science projects, but this also does impact the humanities and social sciences. And although there is some debate over archaeology and its place in the humanities or the social sciences, it's clear that archaeology is continuing to apply information technology and these new communication strategies to archaeology research, and that leads to not only the same types of issues with the technology obsolescence, the bad storage media, or poor information or data stewardship, but also there's some issues with archaeology which are very particular to the domain, which need to be looked at and be understood in order to preserve archaeology materials. And some of them just apply to the unique natures of sites. It can be on land, it can be underwater. Each of the sites then is unique in and of itself. It may be in the same region, but if it's not, or even if it's in the same place, it's going to be a different site. It's going to be a different project, different challenges that the archaeologists face. And by its very nature, archaeology is destructive. In order to completely understand a site and to excavate it, you basically destroy the site in its context. So you have one chance to document that site. You have to be very precise on the types of information that you capture, or a lot of what you do, the money you invested, the time you invested in excavating the site is lost. It's no good. Now there are some technology advances, especially remote sensing, that lessen the destructive nature of the site, but then that doesn't lead to total study or total understanding of the site. In some cases, the remote sensing is just sort of a temporary stopgap measure that's undertaken due to time or budget restrictions. Now, in addition to the unique nature of sites, archaeology sites and projects result in a large number of highly complex materials due to the types of technology that's being used. Everything from digital photography, which is essential to be able to document step by step what's occurring. In the case of nautical archaeology, you have things like code sensor arrays for side-scan sonar, also for photography, and you also have applications used to make charts, graphs. You have GIS systems, maps, etc. These are all, in some cases, multiple formats that need to be tracked and understood. And then also another challenge is the unique nature of archaeology and control of the principal investigator, the archaeologist. A lot of cases, as they go about to excavate sites, they're doing a lot of it on personal experience and the wealth of knowledge that they have built up excavating prior sites and working in similar areas or similar regions and same type of materials. A lot of that information goes into designing project plans and how they're going to tackle the site. Archaeologists see themselves as the primary steward for that information at this point, so a lot of the information remains under their control. In that cases, it may be placed in a separate database in some department or some nonprofit organization. It's difficult to access that. Also, a lot of these reports go out in the grade literature with limited distribution, and a lot of the maps and pictures and things like that that come out of these projects go into that literature, and they're hard to access as well. Finally, just with the particular role of the archaeologist, again, a lot of that information about why they're excavating at a particular site, what they hope to find, methods that they use to do that, how their data is managed and organized, also the artifacts, the maps, and photographs is staying with the archaeologist. In some cases, it's not documented at the time it's being created. So in cases where the archaeologist or other principal specialists on the project are for some reason not available or incapacitated, or God forbid, they're not no longer with us, that information may disappear forever and be unable to be accessed or found again. So those are just some challenges with archaeology material, and that helped me to think about some of these questions as I went into this study. And since with my involvement with the digital curation curriculum, I've been thinking a lot about digital curation and how not only how do we prepare students to go out and do this type of work, but what goes into that? What do we consider as digital curation expertise? And since I have a background in archaeology and an interest in materials, I used archaeology as a specific domain to explore. So that led to a question about what do we have to know to be able to preserve the materials, what knowledge is necessary to curate them, and how individuals can go about getting this expertise. Is it something that they learn through programs like SILS, or is it something that they go out and get a degree in archaeology and come here for a few classes? And a lot of that is something that I'm interested in finding an answer to. Now, when I mentioned framework to help me along, this is Jaakko and Kors's model of archival intelligence. I did talk about this when I went through my current work class, but just as a little refresher here, you can see that their interview with 28 users of an archive resulted in their identification of 3 areas of knowledge that they see as essential to define expertise in the use of archives. And you can see that's domain knowledge is one of them, which consists of what that researcher brings there, their understanding of the topic. If they're a politician and they're studying, let's say, Roosevelt's administration, what do they specifically know is going on at that time? Artifactual literacy is being able to look at an object and being able to treat that and interpret that or analyze that as text. I tried to think of a good example here to explain that. And one of the things in archaeology, If a site, say somebody's digging in the Midwest and they come across a lot of shoulder blades from bison, and they have particular marks on those tools, maybe, or on that shoulder blade, that piece of bone, maybe some wear marks or something like that. Well, based on looking at that, they can basically infer then that the people that occupied that site at that specific point in time also did agriculture, some type of subsistence farming, because that was a common tool to be able to use as a whole to keep their crops clean, etc. And then final, archival intelligence. This is something that the user of the archive would bring to a specific facility. And it's not only understanding how that institution operate, but also ways to get at resources, whether it's asking questions of the archivist, or knowing what collections to start with, and then their intellectual skills, which is just being able to do critical thinking, problem solving, and being able to know what to get to answer their questions. So I took that framework and kind of flipped it, and started to think about, well, that was initially developed to give archival educators or archivists to be better able to prepare maybe education programs or materials to help people coming into the archives. Well, what if we looked at this from the perspective of this domain, where what do archivists need to know to be able to be experts in curating materials? And I substituted for their archival intelligence, and I came up with a category called digital curation intelligence. And thankfully, the DIG seeker effort is going to come up with answers to what archivists need to know in that area, which will be very interesting. Stay tuned for that. Forthcoming. For those of you who were there Thursday and Friday, you probably got some of the answers to that from hearing that. But then this domain knowledge area. You know, what really do archivists need to know about archaeology to preserve these materials? And one of the key things with that is to, I think that from talking, as part of the DIG seeker effort, we're interviewing our advisory board members. And I think one of the questions is asking them some of the shortcomings of what they see when people walk in to preserve certain types of materials. But in answering some of these questions, they're identifying that from their perspective, archivists, or the curators of materials, need to understand the domain to be able to curate those materials, but also to be able to communicate with the people that are creating the records, and also the people then that are reusing the records. So there is some type of knowledge that is necessary to be able to understand the materials, to be able to curate those materials. In the archaeology literature as well is stating that, you know, archaeology projects, the materials, there are unique things that you need to understand about these projects to be able to be a good steward for this material. And that's why I think one of the reasons that archaeologists see themselves as primary stewards of these materials at this time, because they feel they're in the best position to be able to reuse those materials. But now to get to this whole trying to understand this domain, one of the things that I did was start to think of this from the process perspective. What goes on these projects, who's involved in these projects, what activities are they doing, what types of tools are they using to do that. And based on some of the literature and my own experiences, I came up with a very high-level process model that I'd like to drill into to get a better detailed understanding in the coming months. And if we think about any type of project, there's always going to be some point where the principal investigator is thinking about future research efforts, and whether it's other readings that they're doing, other work that they're going on. Something is playing a role in them coming up with this research idea. And that goes really into this whole idea about this first step, which is all about discovery. Now, discovery is going out and looking at unique sites, coming across something. It could be something that someone mentions that they found on their farm. It could be something that the archaeologist, if they monitor a certain area that they're aware of, and they go out and they check these fields, they stand on top of it. Field walking is simply that, it's walking in the field. It's also called pedestrian surveying, or in some cases in contract archaeology, it was also referred to as windshield surveying. Basically, you want to cover as much ground as possible when you're on the clock. Also, remote sensing is starting to play a role here in really in maritime archaeology. A lot of that is done by towing side scan sonars, or actually towing divers through the water to spot wrecks. Now once that site is found, in some cases there's test pits dug there, come up with an initial understanding of the materials. Then that leads into this step that there's some inquiry, reflection, where the archaeologist then takes a look at what they are finding. They will look at things, site surveys that may be put together in a region. These are the types of sites that are in these regions. These are what people have found there so far. Or it's literature reviews. They may go out and do additional tests on a specific site. And that will help them formulate plans to actually do their primary examination of that site, which is excavation. That could lead, could consist of just systematic sampling to get a better understanding, all the way to full-scale excavation of the site. After that, there is evaluation. Now, today's world, at one point these really were disjointed steps. There's examination, all the work was done at the site. People would pack up at the end of the season, go back to the labs to try to make sense of what they were finding. Now today, using information communication technologies, databases, even project blogs, email, a lot of this, there's a loop back, and these are actually happening in parallel. In one case, Ian Hodder writes a lot about the work he does in Turkey. He talks about bringing specialists from the lab and having them come out and actually sit in and watch things being taken from the ground so they have a better understanding of the context, and helping that then play a role in planning and continuing to lead the excavation at that time. And finally, after the post-excavation and analysis, there's the normal report writing, data dissemination, which can include going out giving lectures and other things like that. But at a very high level, these are the steps that you go through on any type of archaeology project, whether it's land, water, whether it's done in the dead of winter, which does happen on occasion, or in the summer on a very nice island somewhere in the Caribbean. Now this just is the process and some of the activities and some types of the data in some cases that are coming out of it. Throughout the whole project, technology is being used, whether it's ranging from word processing, which could be taking place of project diaries. Archaeologists used to always carry around like a field notebook where they'd be taking notes and jotting sketches and things like that, which some still do. But a lot of that is going directly into electronic form. They're thinking, and then think about remote sensing, image processing, digital photographs, digital video, simulations. A lot of visualization technologies now are being applied to archaeology as well, and desktop publishing, etc. This is just an initial look at some of the technologies. I'm sure that I could add many more to this. Now we have the process, we have some of the activities, some of the data that's coming out, the tools that are being used, and another dimension then is the people that are involved in this whole process, which adds to the complexity to these projects, to what you need to know about these projects. And just to quickly go through this, the project team is going to include the archaeologists, but also the field people and the specialists that are in the lab. Now, government, usually you have somebody from the state, local, or federal government that's involved in these efforts. They are there to ensure that you stay in compliance with laws, policies, rules that are in place for excavating in a particular area. Maybe endangered species laws might apply. You have to protect plants that are on those lists. The media, whenever you start digging anywhere, the media shows up. They want to know how much gold you're going to find in a particular area. There's none there. Perhaps as part of this, or maybe even in a new bubble, think about educators. Local schools always take advantage of archaeology projects. Archaeologists really do believe strongly in outreach to the schools to keep the kids informed of what's going on. And then another bubble is community. Now that could be the scholarly community. It also could be the community where these projects are taking place. In like a tribal environment, for example, there's an active effort to keep the community involved exactly in what you're doing, in what types of artifacts you're finding, but also in the case if there's potential disturbances to grave sites. It's going to depend on specific cultures, on how they will react to that, and how well you need to keep them involved in that effort. So this is the process model that I've developed from literature and from experience, and it's something that I want to continue to explore in the coming months. I'll talk about some future efforts here in just a minute, but each one of these things, areas can be drilled down in, taken to the next level, and specifically look at where people are being involved. Who's touching what in these roles in the project team, for example. What technology are they using? Where does the information go? Does it go to the next step? What are they doing with it? Where is it being stored? How long do they need to store that? So as part of that, this summer, continue to expand the literature review. I want to branch into other fields to start looking at how particular projects are undertaken in areas of the sciences, maybe biology, and also some things like product development, and to see what I can learn about how they manage their data and how that could potentially apply to archaeology, as well as to go out to use the process model that I have, to talk to the archaeologists that are involved in these efforts, as well as subject specialists and others, and to continue to refine that process model, to have that play a role in future efforts, which could involve participant observation project and specific semi-structured interviews with experts to continue to come up with this information and to try to flesh out that model to get a better handle on how information is being used, to end up with an understanding of what we need to know to preserve these materials. So, questions and comments?
I don't know about dragging those divers behind your boat.
Actually, actually, it's quite fun to do that. And it's very valuable. It's a good research activity. And not all, I just picked this picture. It's a nice picture, but I think people, when they think about nautical archaeology, they think it's crystal clear waters like this. It's not.
You're going to drag through the Mississippi?
No, but I've spent many hours in the bottom of Cape Fear River, not being able to see more than an inch. Having somebody looking for alligators and snakes, I guess.
So I'm curious, I mean, one of the issues of data curation and reuse and management is always sort of the culture of a particular discipline and the degree to which people support reuse and are willing to share their data, and also the degree to which it's now considered legitimate research to do secondary analysis. I mean, what is your sense of within this arena, how much people are willing to share their data, and also how much of that pipeline you showed us might change if it's actually legitimate to use somebody else's data, or is that just considered not really real research in this arena?
Yeah, it is real research. It's a huge challenge, because not only are you thinking about like security, privacy type things, privacy if you're dealing with maybe disturbing grave sites, but security of these sites, because a lot of cases you will have people, pot hunters or looters, that will go out and try to, even though there's nothing of value there to them, they think that it's an archaeology site. Archaeologists are spending a lot of money digging for something. Right. So you need to protect those sites. I think that there are things that can be done now to protect some of that data and still make it valuable to be reused by others. And I think that there is a growing acceptance of archaeologists to share data, at least an understanding of a need to do that, to be able to do comparative studies or these longitudinal type studies to see how land has been used over a certain time period. And the only way you can do that is looking at prior research. It's not going to be easy. I know I started participating in the archaeoinformatics group, which is something that's centered down at the University of Arkansas, and it's looking at ways to better use their digital materials, because it does lend itself to be integrated and to do these types of comparative longitudinal studies. And they're still having a lot of challenges in doing that, and just talking about metadata and coming up with standards and control vocabularies, there's a lot of resistance on that to do that, because they still are at the point where they think that each of the sites are unique, and it's unique data. Each one needs to be treated differently. And they feel that any effort at this point even to talk about standardization would just prevent it from going further. But they're at the point where even somebody brought up a question about institutional repositories in the last meeting. They call that pie in the sky. They don't even want to consider that at this point, because it's not going to happen from their perspective type thing. So it kind of showed that they are a little bit familiar about the learning technology.
One of the things that's occurred to me lately, we all fill out these IRB things, and we all say our data is going to be kept in our group.
In a locked filing cabinet.
In a locked filing cabinet.
Yeah.
Even if we don't have keys, it's going to be in a locked filing cabinet. And I think people say, I think that's what you say frequently, and maybe at the beginning of your project that's what you really think too. But if we're actually looking at a culture of reuse over time of this information, it seems that there has to be some mechanism to work with researchers. At what point, if you let your IRB lapse, how do you go back and redo that and make that open?
You have to ask for a secondary analysis, you guys already do them.
The dog ate my IRB. The dog ate my filing cabinet.
In a way, this would be easier if you had foresaw that use, that potential use at the beginning, right?
Because then you could just keep it open.
I think one of the things I didn't touch on was that there is a difference between academic archaeologists and academic projects, which they really feel need to share the data, and they, I think, are a little bit more forthcoming in doing that. I think they have better support doing that as well, because of institutional structure and others, etc. But there's a lot of the money in the U.S. is going towards cultural resource management, these contract archaeology firms, where they're, by law, if you're putting in, say, a new highway or something like that, you are obligated to pay for a survey. The contract with the firm that will go out there and walk the site, they'll do shovel pit tests, things like that, to excavate it to see what's there, and if they come across something, they are bound to excavate that site. Whether it's systematic sampling, or if it's an important site, they'll have to do full-scale excavation, and that costs a lot of money. And that money is coming out of, say, the pockets of the people building the roads or the pipelines, in the case of industry. And I think that there's a reluctance to some extent about what do they need to do, and how much do they need to distribute those findings. And that's where a lot of the reports maybe are very limited distribution on purpose, to some extent, to help them with the bottom line. So I think actually the government is in a position where they can put greater requirements on people, similar to like the National Institute of Health has done, where you have a project, you get funding over X amount, and I think it's a fairly small amount, 25,000, 50,000, something like that. But you have to deposit that data in an accessible repository. And I think that that's something that needs to be considered. And that might be the carrot, or maybe the stick, to get some of these cultural resource management archaeologists to do that. It'll be interesting to see if that happens.
Okay, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you.